it's kind of anticlimactic because you don't get nearly as excited about the tweets as Lewis does. Guy, he just loves to get his hands on those tweets. There it is. Okay, there it is.
I don't see it though.
It's coming. Just wait for it.
Oh,
And we're live. Okay, put you on your F-bomb detector there, so you don't say it accidentally. Since we're live on the stream, let's see them all. They're all pouring in. All pouring in. If you want to shout out, jump into the chat. Now's the time. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today here. Gentle dudes. Oh, man. Lots of people jumping in. Did you retweet that, Leander?
well, just like literally 1 second ago.
Okay, well, that's all it takes. Powerful reaction coming from the Cultimac Twitter stream. We got Jay Cruz here. Hey, y'all. Anthony Croft, good morning. Or good evening, fellas. Okay, he's somewhere where it's night. Oh, Chase McLean. He has got a yippee-ki-yay for us. All right, guys. I can't say the last part of that. I'm sure Leander would love to say the last part of that, but
I'm not going to say it.
we get Harley McFadden here with a very enthusiastic hello. We got 86 Seabass. Not 87, not 85. He's got a very chipper hey, y'all. Dudes, we got so much to talk about today. We've got the Mac Studio reviews pouring in. The Mac Studio reviews. This is just so funny. Just wait till I show you. All these reviewers tripping over one another to talk about the Mac Studio. And Apple's clearly, they're clearly pushing this hard because they sent this thing to everybody. I mean, normally they would have only sent the Mac Studio to like a couple of people. Like MKBHD would have got his hands on one, and he would have been like the only reviewer. And maybe a couple others. And now it's like you just scroll, you search Mac Studio on YouTube, and it's just like, there's all the common reviewers that you're used to, and there's people where you're like, really, they got one? Like, that's kind of surprising. But they're definitely pushing this hard, and we got some news on the iPhone 14 coming up, which I don't think you're gonna like. I don't think you're gonna like this news, but we're gonna tell it to you anyway because that's what we do here. So let's queue up Mrs. You know who? Oh, Mrs. D. I got your favorite guy here. Look at him blink. It gets me all hot and bothered. Oh, geez, Mrs. D. Well, he is blinking a lot, isn't he? Look at him. It's like...
Really stop it. It's making me blink more. Look, I wasn't blinking until you mentioned it. Now it's like a...
No, you were blinking. You just didn't realize it. It was subconscious, but I brought it to your attention.
Maybe it's the coffee, actually.
Yeah, it could be.
Huh.
You were taking a shot of something before we started.
Yeah.
All right. Let me cue up the music. We got a lot of stuff to talk about here, so let's go ahead and get this going in. Whoop. In 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome to the best 30-plus minute Apple conversation you're going to hear all week long. I'm your host, Aaron Elijah. Join me today. His favorite activities include riding his $10,000 bicycle, writing best-selling Apple books, and cracking chairs over the heads of unsuspecting pub patrons to get the whole bar brawling. That's his favorite one. He's the founder of Cultimac.
Hello.
I don't know why, but the idea of you having a few drinks and then hitting some unsuspecting guy over the back with a chair to start the whole bar fighting, it's just really funny to me.
Did I tell you that story? This guy I used to know, Arn, the Scottish guy, he did exactly that. He cracked a bottle over someone's head on this dance floor, and I've never seen anything like it. The entire bar started fighting, except me. I ran to the corner.
Oh, no, you didn't. Come on.
Yeah, of course I did. I'm a complete coward.
You're like, kill him! You're choking some guy.
God, no, he was a complete I was like terrified. I was dancing next to him. We were having a good time. The next thing you know, he's brawling with someone. I'm like, this is too much for me. So I ran to the side, and then the bouncers cleared the bar, and there was like glass everywhere, all over the floor. There was just like, it was like walking on, broken glass. I've never seen anything like it.
So you guys were all just dancing, having a good time, and then he was like, all right, it's time to kick this up a notch, and he just grabbed a ball and just broke it over some guys. Some random guys.
And it was exactly like that. I think he was probably getting into a fight with somebody. Like, I think it probably been going on for a while.
Okay, so he knew the person. It wasn't some unsuspecting random person. Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact circumstances. I suspect that he'd been feuding with someone in the bar and then decided to attack him on the dance floor in the middle of, the hottest tune of the night. And it was New Year's Eve, I think, too. And I think we tried it really hard to get into this bar.
Yeah.
and it was almost impossible to get in. It was completely packed. But yeah, it was just like a cowboy, in a cowboy movie when everybody's fighting. It was
Yeah.
just completely mad.
That's literally how I imagine your Saturday nights. Every Saturday night at Big is that's exactly what
Well,
happens. That you're just at the bar, everyone's hanging out, and then all of a sudden, LK just the switch flips, and you just grab a bar or a bottle or a chair and just over some guy's head or back, and then boom, the whole bar is just like just pummeling each other. And then of course you sneak out from the bottom and
Yeah,
take
exactly.
off.
Crawl under the tables, yeah, and I'm out of there.
Oh man. Okay. Well, look, we got a lot of stuff to talk about here, guys. The Mac Studio reviews are in. I mean, let me see if I can pull this up. Just check this out. It's just one after another, after another, after another. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to watch these all yet because they all started pouring in this morning. But Apple sent this. Look, the whole first page of YouTube is just full of Mac Studio reviews. Apple or the Studio Display reviews, and so I did watch some of these, and I'll talk about some of the highlights. We've also got some seriously bizarre news about iPhone 14, and honestly, if it weren't for the source and their credibility, I probably wouldn't even talk about this story because I find it to be so unbelievable. And if Apple actually goes through with this move, it will be one of the strangest Apple moves that I think I've seen in a long time. In fact, I have a hard time believing it. And if they do this, I was just imagining Tim Cook talking about iPhone 14 on stage, and this thing I'm going to talk about actually being true. It's going to be so cringeworthy. It's going to be hard to watch. I know I'm building that up a lot, but I actually think that's probably pretty accurate. I don't think that's hyperbole. Let's see. Before we dive in, I'm going to give a big old thank you to me for creating Cult Cloth because it's a gift to the world. Cultcloth.co. Cultcloth.co. Did you get a brand new Mac Studio or Studio Display? Well, you're going to need some Cult Cloth to take care of those high quality items. And Cult Cloth is the best way that I've found to keep all of your tech, your glasses, all of your high-end goods in clean, tip-top shape, because these are premium grade cleaning cloths. They're made from a special fiber that goes through this process that breaks down the fiber and creates all these cracks in it, which drastically increases the surface area. Exponentially, I should say. That's way more powerful. Exponentially increases the surface area. And when you wipe down your gear, your glasses, your lenses, your screens, your keyboards with Cult Cloth, you'll just be surprised. I mean, it just leaves nothing behind but sparkling glass and metal. And that's without cleaning solution. If you add a little bit of cleaning solution, or I just use a little spritz of water sometimes, or just a little bit of that action, and it just leaves nothing behind. And I'm continually surprised by how well they work.
I spit on everything.
Yeah, that's gross.
I spat on the TV the other day to clean it up.
Please tell me that's not true. With the Cult Cloth?
Unfortunate history. Yeah, with the Cult Cloth. Yeah, it soaked it right up. It worked amazingly.
I mean, I guess that's one option if you don't want to just do a little bit of that. I think I prefer that. But yeah, I guess it's that's actually a powerful testimonial. Is powerful enough to clean up Leander's nasty loogies that he spits all over his gear to keep them.
I just ate some chocolate cookies too, so it was a bit. It was kind of brown.
and yet your TV was still sparkling clean afterwards.
It was
right?
absolutely spotless.
Yeah. I mean, they really can power through the dirt and grime and saliva and loogies and all that stuff. Cultcloth.co. You'll get a free 8x8 carry cloth with your order if you use code CultCast at checkout at cultcloth.co. You're gonna love the way they work. I guarantee it. All right, look. I know this is kind of impromptu here, LK, but I at least wanted to mention that all of the Mac Studio displays are the reviews are coming in, and they're all over YouTube now. So I'm sure you guys have all seen some of them. But if I had to summarize the takeaways, I would probably summarize it the way, I hate to admit this, the way The Verge is, and that is Mac Studio thumbs up, Studio Display thumbs down. I wouldn't say that I'm a solid thumbs down on the Studio Display, but if you guys caught my my bit last week about what the Studio Display actually is, and just to summarize, I was close. I was a little bit off. I was comparing it to the M1 iMac and how they had basically just increased the resolution from 4.5K to 5K, and then increase the size from 24 inches to 27 inches. You're literally getting an iMac without the Mac part for a higher price. But that's not quite right. What is more true is it's literally the 27-inch iMac, the 5K display from the 27-inch iMac in a M1 iMac body that's a little larger, and then they raise the price on you, and that's pretty much what it is. So I think a lot of people are kind of in agreement that the Studio Display is beautiful, and it's uniquely Apple. It's built very well. It has that aesthetic that we all love. It has the built-in speakers. It works perfectly with your Mac Studio, but it's not worth $1,600. I mean, I mentioned this last week. I got a discount on mine. Thankfully, it was a substantial discount. I'll just put it that way, and it really helped me make the purchase. But so I ended up getting the Studio Display at $1,200. Even at $1,200, I was like, I'm not really sure, because you can get the LG Ultrafine 5K, which is pretty much the same display quality, and it's minus some of the features that you get from Apple for $1,300. But you can get that display for, $1,000 to $1,100 if you know where to look. And I think that's what Apple was going off of when they priced their Studio Display. They were pricing it off of the LG Ultrafine, and there's just not a lot of 5K displays out there, period, at 27 inches or any other size. So Apple's got a unique resolution, especially when you consider that it's Retina quality. So they just don't have a lot of competition in that space. But if you don't need 5K, I think the consensus is you can get an HDR monitor that's 4K for a cheaper price and a larger screen, and be perfectly happy. So if you don't have a specific use case or need for 5K, you'd probably be better off getting a 4K display. It will be cheaper. You can get one that's larger. It may not have all the bells and whistles, but it's gonna be a lot less expensive, and you'll probably be pretty happy with it. The only thing I would caution against is Mac OS doesn't render text extremely well at less than Retina qualities. So your text may not look the best, but I think for a lot of people, they may not even notice. So it's up to you. I'm just going to give you the information. Do with that what you want. I have pre-ordered the Studio Display. I'm waiting to get my hands on it, and I'll make my decision once I've had the chance to try it out. But the thing about all these reviews is you got to keep in mind that Apple is really smart about YouTube these days. They send out these products to all of these reviewers early. And all these people will always say, oh, I got the product for free, but it doesn't influence my opinion at all. Yeah, dude. I'm a product reviewer. I will tell you the truth. It does impact your opinion. Because in the back of your mind, well, for two reasons. One, you didn't have to pay for it, right? It's much more painful if you buy something. And
well, a lot of the professional reviewers, they return them. They return the product. It's not theirs. They don't get it to keep. It's not free.
That's true.
It's lent to...
That's true. But I guess my point being, like, if you had paid for it, then and you found something that you didn't like, you would really be unhappy because now you're out the money, right?
I think it's the other way. I think a lot of people who pay for something, they bend over backwards to justify their purchase. I mean, how many times how many times you go to the movie theater and you hate the movie, but you're going to sit through it because you just spent, $16 on the ticket and another $20 on candy and rubbish, so you're determined to get your money's worth. I think that definitely happens with people who buy stuff. I mean, they try to ignore the defects because they don't want to feel like they got ripped off.
That's interesting because I feel like for me, I hate when I spend money on something and it ends up not living up to the standard I had expected it to live up to. Right. And then I'm very vocal about that.
Well, if it's a real lemon, yeah, for sure you can. But if it's like if there's a few flaws, if there's a few things that you don't like, I think you tend to sort of ignore that stuff. I mean, not in every case, but often, I just think the logic is the opposite. I think if someone's getting something for free, they don't value it at all.
Yeah, well, the other thing about getting these reviews or getting these review units, and even if they have to return them, and I don't mean to cachet to any of these people, I would probably do the exact same thing, but it's access journalism, right? Like, in the back of your mind, if you really lay into something, if there's a really serious problem and you're like, this is a big deal, you are more inclined to to temper your actual feedback about a product or your actual opinion about a product, because you know if you're too harsh on it, then you probably won't get access again in the future. And these people's channels depend on getting early access to products because they get the product before anyone else. Everyone wants to know what to think about the Mac Studio or the Studio Display, and so they go to your channel to hear your opinion. And YouTube is so competitive these days that getting this early access is literally gold. I mean, it just gets you tons of clicks. So again, I'm not criticizing any of these people. I would do the exact same thing. I just think that you got to keep that in mind when you're watching the reviews, because the reviews are going to be positive, and that's why Apple does it. They want to fill YouTube with positive reviews of their products so that people go out and buy the products. I think the real reviews are going to come in the next 30 to 60 days. Yes, Leander.
Well, having said that, I think a lot of the early reviews of the Studio Display are pretty fair. I think people point out that it's an older display, that it's pretty pricey, and that it has a few shortcomings. You're not getting an XDR display here. But then again, like Malik had an interesting piece about the display, saying that this thing is actually sort of basically a mini computer with its own processor, and it's running some sort of custom iOS type operating system, which isn't iOS, but it's it does a lot of processing for the speakers, for doing spatial audio. You can AirPlay to it when the computer's asleep. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, like, it's almost it doesn't do a whole bunch of stuff, but it sort of sits independently of the machine. So you're whatever you got plugged into it can be totally asleep, and you can still use the display because it's got its own chip. And he's saying that this is like a glimpse of the future, like where a lot of everything's going to get a chip, everything's going to get a display. This is also like AR and VR, like a precursor to that, because it's going to be, they're doing all this spatial and 3D, sound and visual computing on the display. So, even though it's an older display, he still likes it. He uses an XDR display and said that this thing is like, even, it's nowhere near the quality of the XDR, but look at the price difference, for the money, he thinks it's still a good deal, which I thought, that made me feel
when
better.
you compare it to the Pro XDR, I mean, of course it's gonna feel like a good deal because they got your price anchored at $5,000, and you're like, this one's only $1,600. But I'm not looking at it from that perspective. I'm looking at it from what can you get in the monitor world for $1,600? There's a lot of monitors out there that have features that are going to be better for video editing, and that's the perspective that I'm looking at this from, than this particular monitor. This monitor doesn't do HDR. It doesn't have ProMotion. I mean, there's just a lot of things that it seems like it's missing for that price tag. It's only 27 inches. Like, you get a 32-inch 4K monitor for way less money, and it won't have the polish of this monitor for sure, but it's going to be a beautiful display, and it may cost a third of the price. So it depends on what you need.
Right. Yeah.
But when you think about it in terms of, well, the Pro XDR is $5,000, it's like, okay. And speaking to the whole, it has an A13 chip inside. People are impressed with that. I honestly think that's kind of unimportant. It's erroneous. It's like, if you have a Mac, any Mac can process. Well, let me rephrase this. Any new Mac can give you the capabilities that the A13 chip in this display is giving you, it seems to me. So the only reason that an A13 is present in this monitor is because Apple wants to make Hey Siri and the really super high quality FaceTime camera, computational HDR and all that stuff available to older Macs. So it will enable those features on older Macs, because a newer Mac can do that without having an A13 chip to run that stuff, right? Like, if you plugged your newer Mac into this monitor or into any monitor, you still have Hey Siri. I'm sorry, I'm saying it to everyone. Sorry, forgive me. Hey, you know who capabilities. So it seems like you're paying for a feature that a lot of people may not necessarily be using because they have a newer Mac. That's the way it seems to me. Anyway, I don't mean to bag on the Studio Display. Look, my you know who is now going crazy. It's all listening to me. Here, I'll solve it for you guys. Stop. There it goes. I solved all your problems. What's that? Yes, Leander.
No. So what about the Mac Studio?
Mac Studio. Everyone loves it. I mean, it's ridiculously overpowered. And in fact, that's been the thing about the M1 Ultra that everyone has said so far. It's like almost unanimous. Is it's more power than you need. It's more power than you'll probably ever use. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm okay with that. Like, I don't mind having that extra power that I probably won't use for 1 or 2 years. I mean, that's the whole point of it. And if you use Final Cut Pro, it's going to be a dream machine for you. It's just going to, because Final Cut Pro will take advantage of all the extra cores and give you that time savings because you have all that extra computational power. And there's a lot of benchmarks in all these reviews. I won't dive into all of them right now. You guys can go and watch them yourself. But if you are a video editor or you're doing a lot of image editing or something like that, then these extra cores are probably going to benefit you in a big way. In fact, you probably won't even get close to maxing out this machine anytime soon because it's just way more power than even high volume YouTube creators need at this point, which I was surprised to find out. I thought surely someone like MKBHD or someone who's creating like really high end videos, high pixel videos, long videos is going to be able to max this machine out. And even creators like that are getting nowhere near the capabilities of the Mac Studio. So I'm super excited for mine. The one thing I will mention is two things about the Mac Studio that you probably would want to know is, first of all, the HDMI port on the back is only HDMI 2.0. So if you have a higher refresh rate display, the Mac Studio won't be able to power that higher refresh rate. It's locked at 60 hertz. So there's that for you. So even if the Studio display was ProMotion, the Mac Studio couldn't take advantage of that extra refresh rate because it.
Is that what people are using then? The HDMI port? You wouldn't want to plug it into a Thunderbolt port?
Oh, you know what? That's actually a good point. Yeah. So if you're using a Thunderbolt port, I'm not sure what capability that has for refresh rate. That's a great point. I didn't even think about that. I'm not sure why.
I figured the HDMI was like for outputting it to a TV or something like that.
You're right. You're right. So if you plug it into Thunderbolt port, I'm glad that you brought that up. It probably is a lot higher. I'm not sure. I haven't heard anyone speak to that. The other thing I would mention is it seems like the amount of power you get out of the M1 Max in the Mac Studio is actually higher than the MacBook Pro. And credit to Max Tech for talking about this, is when you're looking at the keynotes between the M1 Max in the MacBook Pro and the M1 Max in the Mac Studio, the Mac Studio M1 Max is using more power, which is interesting. Why would it use more power? Well, to me, that indicates that's because they're able to run it at a faster clock, so they have to give it more power, and they're able to cool it better. So you get more power out of an M1 Max in the Mac Studio than you do in the MacBook Pro. Now, that's not confirmed. I'm not totally sure if that's going to be the case, but that looks to be the case at this point, which is really interesting. That means that they are nerfing the Mac Studio or the M1 Max in the MacBook Pro because they just can't cool it well enough to really give you all the power that chip is capable of. So I'll be really curious to see when the benchmarks come out of the M1 Max Mac Studio versus the M1 Max MacBook Pro. I can't believe I said that without fumbling over my words.
Right, exactly. Impressive.
Does that make sense? So it looks like if you get the M1 Max, not only, or in the Mac Studio, not only is it going to cost you less than it would be if it were in the MacBook Pro, but it might actually be faster, which would be pretty insane. I mean, that would just increase the value even more because I think I said last week, an M1 Max Mac Studio is $2,400, and the same power in the MacBook Pro is $3,500. Now you get a lot more with the MacBook Pro. You get the display, the keyboard, and everything, right? So there's more to it. But if you just need the power and you already have a keyboard and you already have a display, then the M1 Mac Studio is a really great deal because you're getting the same power, possibly even more for $1,000 less. Okay, so I didn't mean to talk about this for all that time. So all the reviews are out on YouTube. Go check them out. You can get some more information about this yourself. I'll be watching these later as well because Apple is loading up YouTube with positive reviews for the release day tomorrow, the 18th. Okay, let's move on to iPhone 14 because this was a crazy story. And like I mentioned earlier, if the source weren't one that I trusted, I don't think I would even talk about this story because this seems so crazy. But I'll let you take it away there, LK. Let's talk about iPhone 14.
Yeah, so some iPhone 14 models might miss out on the new A16 processor. So the basic iPhone 14 and the iPhone 14 Max will launch this fall with the same A15 processor as the 2021 models, according to Ming Chi Kuo. And this is what you were saying earlier. Mm-hmm. You know, this is why it's got some credence. So apparently only the pricey iPhone 14 Pro and the Pro Max will support the new A16 chip. So if this is true, this is going to be a move that Apple's never used before. And I actually wonder whether it's a bigger deal as you're making out.
What do you mean, like people's reactions to this?
Well, I think the kind of people who buy, I think Apple's counting on this, the kind of people who buy the regular, phones, and so the Pro phones won't care.
Well, I don't know if that's true or not. I think for me, the 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 idea that they're gonna just come out on stage and say, "Hey y'all, here's iPhone 14," and it's got a better camera and some other features that are better than iPhone 13, but you're still getting last year's processor. That seems like an extraordinarily tough sell to me. You mean you're gonna give me the same processor that you had last year, and you're gonna put the newer processor, which is available, or the newer SoC, which is available, into your phone that costs more? That seems incredibly stingy to me. Like, if they came out on stage and did that, I don't know how you're going to justify that move.
Well, Apple's always done it. Like I say, this is unprecedented, but Apple's has for a long, long time had this reputation of using, older technology, right? Older chips, older
Yeah.
RAM specs, older hard drives, older SSDs. Like it's machines have always come under this kind of criticism. Like, people are saying, well, it's I'm trying to think now some examples from recently, but like the RAM specs and stuff like that. I mean, they're never cutting edge. Apple is hardly ever, or not always, using the latest cutting edge text, right? Like, the port you just mentioned on the back, it's like the older HDMI standard. On ports on previous machines, they used older standards, right? And people just, I don't think, the kind of, I think they don't, no one who buys an iPhone buys it for the chip. Nobody. They buy it for the camera, right? They buy it for the screen. They buy it for the whole overall experience. And I think Apple's always been kind of like shy about sort of, like promoting anyway, like make it front and center, the technology that's inside the devices. It's always sort of what you can do with it. It's always, the chip is, you don't buy it for the chip, you buy it for the experience that the chip affords.
Yeah,
and I think they'd be able to sell this, and it wouldn't be a big deal.
I don't know.
It would be to you.
Maybe you're right. Yeah,
it
would be to me. I mean, again, I'd be
Pro
like, are you kidding me? Like, this is a brand new phone, and you're competing with all of these flagship phones from Samsung and other manufacturers.
Of which they still haven't caught up, like on the specs. They even if it's an older model, it still runs rings around everything that they've got on Android.
Well, that might be true, but just by the fact that they are updating the internal components and saying that they're new, and now Tim Cook TC is going to come on stage and try to sell you a phone that is not new. It has the exact same SoC as last year, except the camera's better. I just think that's a very odd sell to me. Like, you're going to come out and Samsung is going to be. I mean, they would be crazy not to capitalize off that, like, and say our phones don't use recycled components, right? Like, we're going to give you the best components that we have in our flagship phones, and when you buy a new iPhone,
but these aren't the flagships, are they? You see, the Pros are the flagships.
Yeah.
So if you want to get the A16 processor, you've got to get a Pro handset.
Yeah.
And you'll pay like $300-400 extra. So that's a proposition. If you want to get, if you just want to get a phone further down the line, it's got an older chip in it. But so what? It's probably got an older battery technology. It's probably got an older, it's probably got all sorts of older chips in it, right? I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
And to me, I would think about it for sure. But I think a lot of people, like I just had a friend who just bought a new phone. She didn't ask once about the processor. She couldn't give an shit about what the processor is. Not, and if I told her, she wouldn't care.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any difference to her.
Yeah, I mean, you might be right. I mean, and maybe that's what Apple is capitalizing off of, is like most people just don't know, and the people who do care, they'll just get a Pro. We got Dipsy Doo in the chat here saying sales of the Pro models will skyrocket. Was that you, Dipsy Doo? And it's like, yeah, you might be right about that, and maybe that's Apple's play. I just think it's it's just a bad look to me. You have these phones that have parity from a performance perspective, and now you're going to leave behind two of the phones that are supposed to be your. I mean, you say they're not flagship models. I think they are. They're your newest phones, and now they're new in name, but they're not new in internal components. And now your iPhone SE is using the same chip as two of your newer, way more expensive phones,
Well,
I
that's
just
a
think
good
the whole
point.
thing is very strange marketing.
The SE does kind of like the new SE. I mean, that kind of like begs my point. It sort of goes against it, right? Because it does use the latest chip, and it's as fast as the latest phones.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, that was just my impression when I saw this story. I figured like there's I think a large percent of the population that will not care whatsoever.
So maybe what they're doing then is, so you'll have the SE, which is the older Touch ID, older camera technology, and smaller form factor, right? And then you'll have the newer iPhones. It's not as fast as the Pro iPhones, but it has the like the brand new camera technology, all the newest bells and whistles, aside from the internal, well, the SoC, right? So it's not going to be as fast. And then the Pro has everything, which
You know what I bet they'll do is even if they're using the same old chip, I bet they'll give it a new name.
you might be right. You
Right?
might be right. There you go. It's like when AT&T called their faster 4G network, or their faster 4G speeds, they call it 5GE. And everyone was like, what the heck? All of a sudden my phone said 5GE, and I was like, what is this? And AT&T was like, well, it's almost as fast as 5G. So now they call it 5GE, which is essentially just a faster mode of 4G. And people don't know, right? I mean, there's a lot going on in life. People don't have time to investigate this stuff. So you might be right. It might be a genius move, but it's like calling it like the Bionic chips. And Phil Schiller was like, we just added Bionic because it made it sound cooler. That was the only reason that there's like an A14 Bionic. It's like there's no such thing. Bionic doesn't actually indicate there's no additional functionality or anything.
Right. It's going to be the A15 Bionicle.
Bionicle.
It's going to make it sound really cool and new.
So we'll see if this happens. I just thought this was stunning news to me because I never would have expected.
Well, you know what
Apple
they're doing.
to do
It's got to be the supply chain.
Well,
supply chain shortages.
Too. Yeah, you might.
So
be right.
they're doing it in a pinch, I'll bet, and they can probably get their hands on a whole bunch of older chips because the fabs are churning those out, but maybe they're having trouble setting up getting the yields on the new chips. So they're going with this.
So we got David Howard in the chat saying he agrees with Leander and Streamlined. Android phones are crappy wannabes. Look, I'm not arguing that. I'm with you all the way on that. I just think from a marketing perspective, it creates this strange disconnection from you having a premium phone because you say it's your newest phone, but now you're putting old hardware internally. I just think from a marketing perspective, that could be a problem for them. I never buy the regular iPhones anyway, so I'm always. Look, I'm a pro guy. We're all pro guys here, pro people here, right? So we know which ones we're getting. This is going to affect us, but I
just
also
the
wonder,
riffraff, yeah,
just the riffraff and the
plebs,
plebes, right? But I do wonder if that means they're going to raise the price of the pros because we're like, well, it's pro now. It's like you're getting the pro stuff. All the pro stuff's in here. So, and it wouldn't surprise me one bit. In fact, I would be surprised if they didn't raise the prices of iPhones and everything else. I mean, the price of everything is skyrocketing, right? So.
Well, talking of chips, actually, we had an interesting story a couple of days ago, which was a company called MediaTek, which I think they make chips for TVs and stuff like that. I mean, they're definitely not one of the big, chip makers. They've come out with a new chip for Android phones, which is almost as good as the latest A15s, and it beats the pads off anything from Qualcomm or Samsung.
Really?
And some people were wondering, like, whether the benchmarks were correct. Because it's so much more powerful than anything else on the Android side, or whether it's been tweaked. Like they said in the past, like benchmarks are sometimes tweaked so that and they don't reflect once the handset comes out. It doesn't get anywhere near the performance it does in these sort of early tests. But it was interesting. This MediaTek company is like coming out of nowhere. I mean, it wasn't on anyone's radar screens, and now they have what looks like the second most powerful chip in the mobile space.
Huh. Coming out of nowhere, huh? Well, see, I mean, you have specs on paper and in marketing materials, but like, what does it actually do when it's inside of a phone, right? That's a different story.
Well, these were based on Geekbench stuff that people noticed. Geekbench scores.
Yeah. And what's the wattage on it? Does it take your battery life down to like 3 minutes?
I haven't got a clue. Yeah,
your phone's so hot you can't even touch it. All right, let's talk about iPad Air as well because we got an iPad Air update this week, and the more I read about the iPad Air, the more I was thinking the iPad Pro, the 11-inch, has become completely pointless. Like, I honestly don't know why anyone would buy an 11-inch iPad Pro at this point. And so let's talk about this. So we got the new iPad Air, and they put the new M1 chip in it, right? And that, of course, makes it as fast as the iPad Pro. So now the performance in many regards is pretty much exactly the same. And I thought we could just talk about the differences now between iPad Air and iPad Pro. And by the way, this is great news for us, right? Because the iPad Air is only $599 and the iPad Pro starts at $799. So essentially, you're getting the Pro performance for $200 less now if you want it. Now, there are some differences that we need to talk about. So first and foremost, it's $599 for the iPad Air for 64 gigabytes of storage, which, is not enough. I hate that Apple does this. I think that the bottom needs to be 128 gigs for all products. 64 is not enough for the OS and for apps and for photos and for videos and all that stuff. But that's what they do. If you want to upgrade to 256 gigabytes of storage, it's $749 for the iPad Air 5. iPad Pro, $799 for the base model, comes with 128 gigs, or you can upgrade that to 256 gigs for $849. So it's $100 more than the iPad Air 5 for the same amount of storage, right? And other than that, you get ProMotion in the iPad Pro, which you don't get on the iPad Air 5, but it's like, I would argue most people don't need that or would even recognize that it's there. The iPad Pro has an 11-inch screen versus 10.9 inches of the regular iPad Air. Now, I was going to mention that the iPad Pro get the mini LED display, but that's actually only the 13-inch or the 12.9-inch display. So you don't get that with the iPad Pro 11-inch. And we don't know when mini LED technology is coming to the iPad Pro, the 11-inch. In fact, I just saw a story from Min-Chi Kuo this week that said it's not coming anytime soon, like not this year, which is kind of a bummer because you would guess that the iPad Pro 13-inch, since it got mini LED and upped the contrast ratio from like 1,300 to 1 to like 1,000,000 to 1, so it makes a big difference. You would think it would be coming to the 11-inch iPad Pro sometime soon, not according to Min-Chi Kuo. So, and that I'm going to guess is due to supply chain problems as well, because that seems like a very weird thing to do, not to have the same quality screen in both iPads. You get 600 nits of brightness in the iPad Pro versus 500 nits for the iPad Air. Not a huge difference. Face ID on the iPad Pro versus Touch ID on the iPad Air.
Yeah, there you go.
You think that's the kicker right there?
Yeah, that's the deal killer for me. Cannot live without Face ID.
Yeah, it does suck not having Face ID. And it also makes it weird to hold the iPad. Like, I was watching a review from Dave 2D, and he was talking about the iPad Air. And he was like, it's weird because if you don't hold the screen at a very specific orientation, like if you're playing a game, then your hand will keep touching the power button and the screen will turn off. And he's like, and if you hold it the other orientation, then your hand is covering one of the speakers. So it's like not the best arrangement of buttons. So if you're big into gaming, that might be a reason to choose the iPad Pro. If you want to get a 5G connection, then you want to go with the iPad Pro because it's the faster 5G, whereas the iPad Air only has the sub 6 millimeter 5G. And then you get a better camera on the iPad Pro. But other than that, they're both compatible with the Magic Folio. They're both compatible with Apple Pencil 2. So for me, it seems kind of like a no-brainer. Like, unless you absolutely have to have Face ID, which I love Face ID, but
you could live without it.
$200.
Yeah,
$200 limit. And then the ProMotion display, which if you're an artist, that might be extremely important to you. But if you're not going to be drawing a lot on your Apple Pen or on your Apple iPad, on your iPad Air 5, then maybe that's not as important. What do you think about that?
Well, I was looking at the prices here. I mean, like, the iPad Air, by the time if you bump it up to 256 gigs, you're spending $750.
Yeah.
But you get an iPad Pro with 256 gigs for $100 more, for $849.
Yep.
And that was, and I think, for the Face ID and for the better screen, for the ProMotion, which I think is absolutely fantastic, I would spend the extra $100.
So
I
it's
would
worth it to you.
I would definitely go with the Pro. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was leaning too. I was like, oh well, if you're going to get the 256 gigs, then there's less of a difference in price. So at that point, you might as well spend the $100 and get Face ID and ProMotion. But yeah, at the low end, at the base end, it's not worth it, I think. If you're going to just get
gig phone. She had like nothing on it. She doesn't take any photos.
Yeah.
She doesn't save anything. You know, she just doesn't use anything at all. So, you know, perfectly fine for her.
Yeah, and well, I don't know. It depends on how much you use your camera. Because I would have made that same argument for my mom, and she takes so many pictures with her iPad, which is funny because she has an older iPad, but she has a brand new iPhone 13. And in fact,
she takes all her pictures with the iPad.
And she takes all her pictures with the iPad, and the iPad has no space on it, and so she's constantly running out of space.
Yeah,
and
there's nothing worse. It's such a headache.
It's such a pain, and that's one of the reasons why I just was like, I gotta cough off the money for the extra storage for my phone and my iPad, because that really is the worst Apple problem to have. Is like when you keep running out of space, and then your iPad or your iPhone gets super slow. It's constantly trying to like upload photos to iCloud and stuff to offload them, which it's just a hassle, you know? So I'd rather pay for the extra storage myself.
Yeah. Future-proof it a bit.
I mean, especially because like the OS and everything takes up like, 20, 30 gigs. It takes up so much space. There's like so much space.
Does it really take that much?
No, I mean, it doesn't actually take up that much, but it takes up a lot of space. And the usable space, I feel like, is constantly constricted.
It takes up like about 8 gigs, not 30.
You know what? Let me look at my iPhone right now, because I mean, I think the actual installation file takes up like 8 gigs or something. But I feel like every time I look at my storage on my iPhone, it says that the system is taking up like 20 gigs. And I'm like, what is it doing with all that space? I have no idea. So anyway, this is thinking. This isn't great television. So we'll wait. Oh no. Okay, here we go. iOS system. It doesn't say. It doesn't break it down for me. Never mind. All right. Well, anyway, moot point. So there you go. There's the differences between the iPad Air 5, iPad Pro. So I think we've solved the quandary here. If you want the 256 gigabytes of storage, it's probably worth getting the Pro. It's only $100 more. If you want to go base, iPad Air 5 all the way, it's not worth the extra $200 for the extra features that you get beyond storage on the iPad Pro.
Pretty amazing what Apple's been doing with its low-end products. I mean, a lot of these are screamers, aren't they now? I mean, everything's getting, becoming really, really nice products, really at the low end. The low-end products are becoming really, really good, aren't they? The SE, the Air, the Mac Studio.
The Mac Studio.
That's a mid-range one.
Well, that actually, I thought that they made the Mac Studio available in 2 different power configurations at 2 radically different prices, I thought was actually a very interesting move. And that $2,000 Mac Studio, I think, is one of the best values in Apple's entire lineup. I mean, the fact that you can get a Mac Studio with all that great I/O, with the power of the M1 Max, and possibly running faster than it does in the MacBook Pro, for only $2,000, that's a crazy good value. And actually, the other thing I learned is the Mac Studio has a built-in speaker. I didn't realize that, right? It has a speaker. Well,
beeping.
I think it has like an actual full-on speaker built in. So if you don't have a monitor, so one of the things I was thinking is like, if you get a monitor that's not the studio display, it's going to be a huge pain because now you have to get some speakers for it, which I don't want to buy an extra pair of speakers. I mean, you can use your HomePod minis, but there's always lag issues. Like, I just feel like they don't work very well for wireless as wireless computer speakers. But if you have a speaker built into the Mac Studio, it's like, shoot, now you can use any monitor you want and you still have a speaker built in. I mean, it's going to be rudimentary audio. It's not going to be, you're not going to have some high quality audio experience, but as long as you can hear what's going on, that might be good enough, because otherwise you have to buy a pair of speakers. So I think it's a killer value.
Actually, interesting thing. Did you see this is almost the same dimensions as, the same width as the Cube? Jason Snell had an interesting picture this morning on Twitter where he had the Mac Studio stacked on top of the Cube, and I was surprised. It's almost exactly the same dimensions.
Oh, that must have been their inspiration for building this. They're like, we got to build it into like the same Cube. The one thing I'll say.
Well, you remember when they discontinued the Cube, they said it was on hiatus. They said it was going to be coming back one day. Remember that? They never discontinued it. Yeah, here it is, 20 years later or whatever it is. Actually, 10, 15.
That is hilarious. It's coming back one day. Oh, here it is. It's back. See, we told you we're coming back. You guys waited. You didn't think it was going to happen. Let me see here. There was one other thing that I thought we should mention. Oh, yeah. Now, this next story, I think this is a huge development in the world of iPad, especially if you want to use your iPad as an actual computer. And and I'll send this over to you, LK, to talk about. But this could actually make me consider using an iPad as a portable laptop.
Yeah, so apparently floating app windows could finally be coming to the iPad, finally. So iPad users will soon be able to work with applications in floating windows if an unconfirmed report is correct. This is a highly requested feature for those who want Apple's tablet to function more like a Mac. So iPad OS will supposedly offer something like a tablet mode or laptop mode, depending on how it's being used. So, quote, Apple is developing a smart system for iPad OS, claims tipster Marin Bu in a tweet. Quote, apps will continue to open full screen, but automatically shrink when connected to a keyboard and trackpad. Internally, it's called Apple Mixer, end quote. So Marimbu isn't able to say whether the feature will launch in this year. He says it won't be. He doesn't know if it's going to be included in iPad OS 16 or not. In addition to a keyboard and trackpad, the feature will require one of Apple's more powerful processors. And he says it could be an M1 iPad exclusive.
Oh, great!
But most Apple tablets meet that qualification. Mm-hmm. So that now that the iPad Air has got the same M1 processor. So I didn't actually see this. So this is going to be if you plug in a keyboard and mouse, the windows will start to shrink.
Yeah. So essentially, it runs. This is kind of what I've been asking for. This isn't exactly what I've been asking for, but this is kind of a unique hack to make it seem as though you're getting to make it seem like you're getting a computer inside of an iPad. Because like what I actually wanted was for some version of Mac OS to run on the iPad, so you can actually use it like as a real computer and not have all of these strange iPad OS compromises for these apps that they're like, we give you multitasking, but it's like some weird multitasking. It's not the kind of multitasking you got on Mac OS, right? And like for this, like you plug it into a keyboard, and instead of having full screen apps all the time, you can now shrink those windows, and you can still see the background on your iPad. Like
so
you
have a desktop,
right?
It would look just like a Mac.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it looks like a Mac, and you can have the windows that you can move around. So you can see all your different windows. You could resize them just exactly how you want. Like that's pretty cool. And
I think it would be cooler because
go ahead.
I can't. Well, I can't get. I can't. I feel like an idiot, but I can't master multi-screen on the iPad. I just cannot. I just can't.
I don't like it either. I don't like it either. I think it's a very weird experience, and it feels like a compromise. It just feels like they're trying to give you something that you have on Mac OS, but it doesn't work as well as it does on.
All these windows keep popping up, and I don't know where they're going, and you have to have one over here and one over there, and hit the buttons on top. It's better than it used to be. It is a little tiny bit more intuitive, but it's not totally intuitive. Every now and again, I'll put two apps next to each other, so you drag something across, but it's definitely not. It's definitely not like you can sit down and oh my God, suddenly you're doing this. It's too hidden, and I don't know anyone who uses it.
I don't either. I know there are people who keep trying to tell me that it's possible and that you can make it all work and you can use an iPad as your main machine, and I think that's true for certain people, but the point is you really have to try. It's not just something that you can sit down and do. You have to decide that you're going to do it and then figure out how you're going to actually make all these apps work. I don't know why they won't just put Mac OS on the iPad. I really don't know why. It seems like it would be exactly what you would want. Like you could have the iPad run in an iPad OS mode when you're not using it as a computer, but then as soon as you plug in a keyboard or mouse, it's like poof, all of a sudden it just turns into Mac OS. This is going to make it feel like Mac OS. I think this is a huge move in the right direction because now you'll have resizable windows. You can place them wherever you want. You can see your desktop behind you, which is something that I don't know why, but it's something that when I can't see what's going on, when I can't see everything there like I can on my Mac, it's like claustrophobic. Like I don't like that the apps are always covering the entire screen, and I can't see what's going on behind them or the other windows that I want to have open. So I think this would be a really cool feature. I don't know if this would make the iPad something that would be. I don't know if I would want to use the iPad as like a notebook replacement, but this would make me consider it. I would at least consider it.
Well, it sounds like it would be, exactly, wouldn't it? A notebook replacement. You get your iPad,
like
plug it in, and suddenly it's a laptop. It's a MacBook.
I mean, the only thing is like you still don't have a normal file system. You still don't have normal apps. you don't have normal Mac apps, so there are going to be some compromises. I don't know why they don't just put Mac OS. Like, why are they resisting? Why don't they just put Mac OS and they'll call it iPad OS hybrid or something? It's like where it has two different modes. I don't know. All right, so there's your iPad news. I thought that was a really cool development. We'll see if that comes out, and if it does, when.
No time soon.
Yeah, we don't actually know if or when. Let's see here. Let's talk about some other stuff from the peak performance events. I guess it could also be called peak performance. Yo, peep this performance. If Tim Cook had said that would have been really cool. There was some interesting stuff talked about during the keynote event that I think is worth discussing, and it kind of leads into a conversation about what's happening next, especially like with Mac Pro and with iMac Pro. And there was an article out from the Germinator this week that talks about some of this stuff, and the title is, with Apple debuting its last M1 chip, here's what's next. And you might think, wait a second, what? Their last M1 chip? Like, isn't the Mac Pro still coming out? Yes, but Apple did say that the M1 Ultra was going to be the last M1 chip. So whatever the Mac Pro gets, it's not going to have a new M1 chip in it. And we could talk about what that means here in just a sec. But there's one thing that Mark said in this piece that really warmed my heart. And he was talking about how impressive the Mac Studio is, and a lot of the other moves that Apple has made in the Mac space, and specifically in regards to the Mac Studio. He said Apple is basically reaffirming or affirming their rededication to the Mac. Now, I'm paraphrasing him because I don't have the exact line, but I was like, you know what? That is really true, because think how far we've come in the last 2 years with the Apple Silicon stuff, but think about like the 4 or 5 years before that, how terrible, what a wasteland it was of developments in the Mac space. I mean, they had the MacBook Pros with the butterfly keyboards. I'm still dealing with that. I'm still having issues with that problem on my MacBook Air with butterfly keyboard. Absolute nightmare. Don't ever buy a butterfly keyboard Mac. Don't ever do it. And then just the lack of improvements from a computing perspective, like a power perspective, an I/O perspective. Like, they took the Macs down to just USB-C/Thunderbolt ports. It was just, honestly, there was one point where I was seriously questioning whether or not I even wanted to buy another Mac. I was like, maybe I should just spend this money and get a PC, because I really was. I'm like, not joking. I really was considering that, because Mac just was going nowhere, and they were having all those keyboard issues, and they were.
I quite like the butterfly keyboard, and
You
I
did
like
like
how thin they were. I mean, like, if you look at, I was just at Best Buy yesterday, and looking at all the laptops there, they all look like MacBook clones. Look at the last. Everyone says it was a waste of time the last 5 or 10 years, but they're really thin and beautiful machines. I mean, they're very, very portable. They were pretty. They did have issues, but I think in general they were still great machines. The laptops anyway. The Mac Pro, I don't know. You could spend, the top end was like $60,000, wasn't it? I think you could spend if you spec that thing out to the full spec. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, they weren't all perfect, but I think in general, the way that Apple led, computer design and they did definitely lead it. I mean, all of the design cues came from Apple's machines. I think there were some honorable attempts there to make these things better. And like, one of my favorites was like the 12-inch MacBook, that was super thin, super portable. What a great machine. Love to see something like that come back again. Like a really, really tiny, really, really lightweight, super, super thin laptop would be my ideal machine. And I think that 12-inch MacBook Pro, from when was it, like 2012 or whatever, 2013? I think that was a really, really great machine, even if the keyboard did break down like 20 minutes after you bought it.
I guess the era I'm speaking to, I think it started in like 2016, like when they moved to the unibody MacBook Pro design. And year over year, the updates just weren't really that impressive, especially from a power perspective. It seemed like, and this is not necessarily Apple's fault because they were using Intel at the time, right?
Yeah.
But every year they would release a new computer, and it was like the exact same performance as the year before, or a very negligible improvement.
10, 20%, something like that, wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh, definitely not 20%. I mean, maybe 10%. and then the I/O had just kind of stagnated, and
Well, I didn't like that. I didn't care about that so much either. I'm not quite like the idea of it. Like if you, a dongle seems fine by me. You get some pretty nice.
How dare
you get these these really these things here, these multifunction adapters. Put one of these in your laptop bags when you need to plug something in. It goes into one of the USB-C ports or the Thunderbolt ports. It works totally fine.
Well, it
most of the time
works,
you don't have something plugged in.
But it's a huge. It's at least to me, it's a huge pain. It's really inconvenient to always need a dongle, and I can't tell you how many times I needed to offload something from my SD card, and I have to go find a dongle first. I mean, like, how annoying is that? And then you look at the Mac Studio, it's got an SD card slot right on the front. It's got USB-A ports on the back. It has Ethernet. I mean, it just has all this stuff. I mean, I can't help but think, if Johnny Ive were still with Apple, this thing would have had 8 Thunderbolt 4 ports on the back, and that's it. That's all that would have been there because
8.
Yeah, or however, or 6,
1.
right? or however many. It definitely would have been symmetrical, and that would have been it. And you would have had to use dongles for everything because a SD card slot is not a Pro port. USB-A is antiquated. I mean, they just had all these reasons for it. They were trying to be pioneering, and in the attempt to be pioneering, they removed all the practicality. They're like, well, it's not. You don't need to have USB-A. USB-A is a dead port, dude. Everybody uses USB-A still. USB-A is so ubiquitous even now. I mean, far more ubiquitous than USB-C. I would say even now in the world of PC. At least it's still used a lot, and Ethernet ports still very much needed. SD card slots. I mean, if you're a creator, you got to have it. And they just removed all that stuff, and then their power or the increases in performance were so negligible every year. I was like, dude, what is this? Like every year, you're buying this computer that just isn't very much better than the year before, and now we're in this whole new era where Apple is the Macs are exciting again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Apple Silicon's definitely injected a whole bunch of excitement back into the line. My God, the Mac is back.
The Mac is back. We need to make a T-shirt. We'll probably get sued though, so let's not do that. So anyway, back into the story. So Apple said during the keynote that they said a few things. First of all, they said the M1 Ultra will be its last M1 chip, and that might make you think, well, then what's going to happen with the Mac Pro? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. They also said that the 27-inch iMac is being discontinued. I think a lot of people are wondering if it's ever going to come back, because why would they have an iMac, 27-inch iMac, if you can buy the Mac Studio and the Mac Studio display? Like, that actually might be the replacement for the iMac Pro. I don't think it is, but people are saying that it might be. And let's see here. What else do we have? Right, and what are we doing with the Mac Pro? So let's talk about that first. So I'm going off of this Bloomberg article here. I think Gurman had some interesting insights. So he's saying that there's probably only a couple of possibilities that's going to happen with the Mac Pro. One is they are going to put an M1 Ultra in the Mac Pro, but they're going to include like 4 of them. So it will be 2 M1 Ultras in the same machine, and so they're not going to come out with some new M1 chip because Apple's not going to create any new M1 chips. If they do that, I think that the Mac Pro will be available this June, which I think is what they're going to have to do, because they said their transition to M1 Silicon is going to happen in 2022, or they said that the transition to Apple Silicon is going to happen in 2022. So if they're going to transition in 2022, well, they're going to have to do something with the Mac Pro, right? Because his other theory was they're going to not put an M1 in the Mac Pro. They're going to put an M2 in the Mac Pro, some kind of like super powerful M2. But if they do that, it probably is not going to be ready this year. So I can't see Apple doing that either. So they're probably going to put a dual M1 Ultra setup in the Mac Pro and then release it this June, because that kind of seems like, if you're going to get done in 2022, that kind of seems like your only option. And there's no way they can release an M2 before the M1 transition is done. That can't happen. So I know people were hoping that the Mac Mini was going to get upgraded to the M2, but you can't release an M2 and then continue releasing M1 chips after that. Like that doesn't make sense from a marketing perspective. So they have to fully transition to M1 before they can start releasing M2, and move over like the MacBook Air and the MacBook Mini. He still thinks that there is going to be a iMac Pro sometime in the probably not in the near future. He was saying it might not come for some time because, well, they just released the Mac Studio, and it would be bad marketing to release a iMac Pro right after the Mac Studio because they're probably going to be in the same realm of performance. I mean, it's going to be strange to see what they do for the iMac Pro. Mark's really convinced that they're going to do an iMac Pro, and I hope that they do too. But if you have a Mac Studio that's already insanely powerful, like what are you going to do for an iMac Pro? What can you do? It's essentially the same machine, right?
You get the all-in-one form factor.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, maybe you'll get the Mac or the Mac Studio / Studio Display all-in-one form factor, and my guess is it won't be quite as powerful as the Mac Studio because the Mac Studio seems to be the machine.
Well, they can't cool it, can they? Half of the Mac Studio is a giant cooling system.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And they're not going to be able to put that into the current form factor of the iMac.
With an absolutely massive heat sink. So I just think like now the whole thing seems strange and muddled. Like, what would you do with an iMac Pro to delineate it between to create a machine that's between an M1 iMac and the Mac Studio? What can you do to make that machine unique? I really can't think of what you would do with that. If you're going to put the M1 Ultra in there and have the same display all in one unit, well, then I don't know. It's like, how much do you charge for something like that, right? Why would you buy a Mac Studio if you can get the same computing performance and screen in an M1 or M2 iMac Pro? I don't know. The whole thing just seems really strange now. And it kind of makes me wonder if we will actually ever see an iMac Pro. I won't go through everything in this article. If you're interested.
Yeah, I was kind of lost anyway. What was the...
Well, I mean, I guess the point was, I mean, he made a lot of points, but the one I was talking about is what's going to happen with the iMac Pro and when we see the M2 released. And according to the Germinator, we're not going to get a Mac Pro. He doesn't think it's going to happen anytime soon, or an iMac Pro anytime soon. Or if it...
When's the 2 years transition up? When do they start?
Well, they said it was going to be complete by 2022. So we don't have that much time left. I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, it's going to be either at WWDC, right, in June,
yeah,
or it's going to be in the fall for the holiday season. And these are both Pro machines,
Yeah.
I would say, they've got to be pushing for June. That's what would be the obvious time to release them.
Yeah, but that's kind of so if they do that. Oh, send them away. Sorry, my mailman's here. I told him that I was dropping off a package, and I wanted to come pick up a package, and then I forgot to put it out there.
So you said send him away?
Yeah, so I was like, just send him away.
Because, send him away?
Yeah, because he came to pick up a package, and I don't have the package ready. So my wife's like, hey, the mailman's here. He wants your package. And I'm like, I bet he does. But it's not ready. So I got nothing for you, Mr. Mailman, so just send him away. Tell him I don't have it. Sorry. So I lost my train of thought. Oh, that's right. Mac Pro. So Gurman's saying that if it comes this year, probably going to be with an M1 Ultra, like a duo M1 Ultra, like two sets of M1 Ultras, right? So 4 M1 Maxes total. Or they could do like an M2 Extreme chip, which is like 4 M2 Max chips in the same computer or something. But the thing that I find very weird is that he says that he doesn't expect Mac Pro this year, but Apple said they're going to complete their move to Apple Silicon this year. So does that mean they're not going to complete it this year? I don't know. So if you're waiting for a Mac Pro, it could be in June. It may be 2023 before you see this stuff materialize. And the other thing that he was talking about was he thinks that Apple will eventually update, or in 2023, update the Pro XDR and probably make it something like a 7K display, which seems a little crazy to me. Like, that's a lot of case, 7Ks. I'm not even sure what you would do with 7Ks. But, and then it might also have like, hey, Siri functionality and center stage, which, but there you go. So I'll link to this in the show notes if you want to check out. He made a lot of predictions for all the different machines coming up in 2022. We don't have time to get into everything, but if you're curious about what's coming next, he had some interesting predictions about what's going to happen in 2023 and all the machines coming out then. Let's talk about.
Let's make this the last story, okay?
Oh, you need to wrap up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And plus, all the other stuff, it looks like in the notes is just a rehash of what we've just been talking about anyway.
Yeah, we kind of meandered our way through most of this stuff already, didn't we? Yeah, we already did. We already talked about most of this stuff just in the natural course of the conversation. Okay, so let's talk about Mac Mini, because I think that.
Oh, hold on. What about this?
What's that?
Well, we had a good story this week from our new writer Griffin, Dylan Jones, who did a pretty detailed comparison between the Pro, the new Studio display versus the Pro XDR display, and the LG whatever it's called, Ultrafine, their display, and a couple of others. And it was a pretty good roundup. I mean, he really knows his stuff, and it's a really good. Shows a feature and spec comparison, and he likes it. He liked the Apple Studio display. Thought it stacked up really well against these other ones.
Yeah, so I wasn't gonna go through this whole story because there's a lot of great
can't
comparisons.
Go through the whole thing, but
yeah,
I think we should plug it. If anyone's interested, I think it's a good roundup.
Yeah, totally. So I'll put a link to this in the show notes. And if you want to check it out, it's how Apple Studio Display stacks up against Pro XDR and other displays. And actually, I totally agree. I thought this was really interesting. Like, if you're wondering what the differences are between the Studio Display and the Pro XDR display, or the Studio Display and the LG Ultrafine 5K, or the MacBook Pro, the 16-inch MacBook Pro with mini LED backlights, it's like he compares that display to all of these displays, and you can see exactly what the differences are. And when you see what the differences are, you're going to think, $1,600? I don't know. I mean, it's up to you, but for $1,600, I just think that the Studio Display is so overpriced. It's just so.
Well,
overpriced.
he concluded the opposite. He thought it was a good deal.
Oh, fanboy. I don't know. I mean, if you compare it to the Pro XDR display, then yes, it is a good deal. But yeah, I don't know, man. $1,600 for a display. Like I said, if you don't need 5K, there's a lot of 4K displays that are better in a lot of different areas than the Studio display. It's not going to have the same build quality. It's not going to have the same beautiful aesthetic or the same seamless functionality with your Mac Studio. But as far as displays go, you'll get a great 4K display that has all the features you need and maybe some of the ones that you don't. And you could probably save $1,000, or even more than that. Let me just mention this one last story before we wrap up. Apple's massive Mac Mini upgrade may not be ready until 2023. This again comes from Ming-Chi Kuo. I think this is crazy. I mean, the Mac Mini was released in November of 2020, I believe, with the M1. And according to Ming-Chi Kuo, the M2 version of this may not come until 2023.
Well, that makes sense, doesn't it?
You mean because that's when they're going to start
I don't think
releasing
Apple's going to start releasing M2s until they've done with the M1s. I mean,
well, they're not. Yeah, they're definitely not. But that would mean, if that were true, that would mean that we're going to get an update to the Mac Pro possibly this year. And if we don't, that means that Apple might be done with the M2 or with computer releases this year. Like, they might just be done. I could see them releasing a M2 MacBook Air sometime in September, right before the holiday season, right? Because that's a really popular computer for a lot of people. And that might be the first one. In fact, I would guess that's going to be the first machine to get the M2. But other than that, we may see no more Mac updates for the rest of the year, which just seems odd to me because, like, the year has just started, And now we're talking about in June, Apple not releasing any new Macs potentially. I think that's odd, but it's a possibility. And then in September, they may announce a new MacBook Air with M2, and then that's it. Or Macs are done for 2022. This
is making my brain hurt. We just went through the whole thing about the Mac Pro and here we are, and it's all total guesswork.
Yeah, we're just trying to guess what Apple's going to do because I know people they got their money on the line, Leander. They want to know what to buy. They want to know what they should buy, and plus, when you know something's coming out, it might affect what you're going to buy now. Like, I almost bought the MacBook Pro, right? I was on the verge of buying it, and then I was like, let's just wait and see, because I thought they were going to release an iMac Pro with Apple Silicon, so I waited, and then they released the Mac Studio, which is even better. I don't think
the iMac Pro's coming or anytime soon.
Well, like I said, according to Gurman, it's not coming anytime soon. I don't know what
Right.
that alludes to, but my guess is not this year. So there you go. I hope we've confused you sufficiently. If not, you can always come back for more confusion. But let's go ahead and wrap it up there because you're right. We're just talking in circles at this point. That's all the Coldcast we have for you guys this week. If you want to come tell us about your favorite Mac model, we're both on Twitter. I'm at Erfon, E-R-F-O-N. Leanna is at L. Caney. Look at me. He's going full-on turbo blink. We got to wrap this thing up before they explode. This has been the Coldcast, the best 30-plus minute app conversation you're going to hear all week long. New episodes of the Coldcast come out every Thursday night. Well, thank everyone for listening and for watching live, and we'll see you guys next time. Oh my goodness, look at those things go.
I gotta go and get some eye drops in. Look, here they are.
Yeah, you gotta get some eye drops of those things quick before they burst. I don't want to see that. It's gonna look like.
Yeah, I don't want to do it live.
It's gonna look like the final scene in Total Recall here in a second.
Okay, all right. Well, stop the recording.
All right, guys. El Caney Brink Ultramax. Oh, you mean Blink Ultramax? We're gonna go ahead and stop the stream there. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm hovering towards the end stream button as we speak. Have a great weekend. Catch you on the next one.
.536. Can't see a thing.